My name is Samson, and this is my story. Here I am, chained in a Philistine prison, blind and cornered by my enemies. It wasn't always like this. Let me tell you my story. It's one of triumph and tragedy, fierce battles and personal struggles. I come from a time when the Philistines ruled over the land of my people, and the fate of a nation rested on the breadth of my shoulders. The Israelites had sinned once again in the eyes of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord delivered us into the hands of the Philistines, who oppressed us for 40 years. The Philistines were an aggressive people living in the land southwest of Israel, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. They were known as the Sea Peoples due to their long and illustrious history in the maritime world. During my time, the Philistines moved inland from the coast of Canaan. There they built their civilization. These cities were each ruled by a tyrant. The Philistines were mortal enemies of mine and my people. They were known for their innovative use of iron, superior to the bronze used by the Israelites for weapons and utensils. The progress of my people as a nation was constantly hindered by the Philistines, who possessed superior technology in their weapons and adopted a more aggressive military strategy. My people simply could not deal with the overwhelming military power of the Philistines. They worshipped three gods, Astarte, Dagon, and Baal-zebub, each with shrines in various cities. My birth is as mysterious as I am. In those days, my father, Manoah from the tribe of Dan, lived in the city of Zorah. His wife, my mother, was barren and had no children. One day, the angel of the Lord appeared to my mother and said, "Though you are barren and have had no children, you will conceive and bear a son. Therefore, be careful not to drink wine or any other fermented drink, and do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." The angel of the Lord who appeared to my mother generally seemed like a man, but his appearance was like that of an angel of God. I was to be a Nazirite. The vow of a Nazirite is a very sacred vow. Under this vow, individuals are considered especially dedicated to God, letting their hair grow without cutting it, not drinking wine, not eating grape products, and avoiding any contact with anything dead. Nazirites do not eat anything impure. The Israelites had rules about clean and unclean foods. A clean animal was one that had completely divided hooves and chewed the cud. Clean animals included oxen, cattle, sheep, goats, deer, etc. Unclean animals were pigs, camels, rock rodents, and rabbits. However, my case is special. I would have this vow from the womb. My mother also had to partake in the Nazirite vow during the time she carried me in her womb. Even in the social structures of my time, the announcement that the child would be a son was especially well received. A son not only continued the family name, but also provided leadership in the home and community. Outside of Israel, a son was also key to a person's well-being here and now, as well as in the afterlife. So she ran and told my father that a man of God who looked like an angel had appeared to her and said she would conceive and bear a son. My father prayed to the Lord and asked for the angel to return to give more instructions about me. My father really wanted the manual for my life. Lord, please let the man of God come again and give us more instructions about the boy who is to be born. God heard my father's prayer, and the angel of God appeared again to my mother while she was sitting in the field. Then my father asked, "When your words come true, what will be the rules that govern the boy's life and work?" The angel of the Lord said, "Make sure your wife follows the instructions I gave her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, nor drink wine or any other fermented drink, nor eat anything unclean." I was to be set apart and reserved for God's will. The angel of the Lord honored my father's request for confirmation, but did not answer his request to know the future. He simply called my father to obey what God had already told them to do. The angel of the Lord proved to be wonderful, doing a wondrous thing by ascending in the flame of the sacrifice toward heaven. And my father said to my mother, "We will surely die, for we have seen God." But she said, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain offering from our hands, nor shown us all these things or told us this." My father may have known what God told Moses, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." He feared that because they had just seen the Lord, they would soon die. But my mother understood that God had not done so much for them just to abandon them now. God's past work in our lives is a promise of his future care and blessing for us. My mother was an invaluable source of encouragement for my father's faith. She did not criticize him. The prophecy was fulfilled, and I was born. The promise of the angel of the Lord was fulfilled and proved to be true. My mother named me Samson. In ancient Israel, either parent could name a child, but there are more accounts of mothers naming their children more frequently than fathers. My name, Samson, derives from the Hebrew word for son, meaning little son. As I grew, the Lord blessed me. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir me. From the moment of my birth, it was clear that I was destined for greatness. As a child, I possessed unique strength, surpassing that of any common man. However, like all men, I was not immune to the temptations of the world. In a sense, I was truly a man of my time. One day, while in Timnah, a Philistine woman caught my eye. It was a case of love at first sight. I saw this woman and immediately wanted to marry her. When I returned home, I told my father and mother, "A young Philistine woman in Timnah has caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me." Timnah was a Philistine city in the land of Canaan, east of our camp. My father and mother objected as I was heading into Philistine territory. They asked, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Why must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But I said to my parents, "Get her for me. She is right in my eyes." And they agreed. She was right in my eyes. Love at first sight is a powerful thing, but dangerous. Although arranged marriages were not mandatory, that was the common practice at the time. Arranged marriages in my time often represented alliances intended to ensure the continuity of families through offspring. My parents advised against such a woman. In Israel, marriages were generally conducted within the clan or tribe, although there were no laws against marrying someone from another tribe. For an Israelite, marrying a Philistine represented a special problem, a commitment to peaceful coexistence and mutual acceptance between clans. However, I ignored my parents and wanted that woman. My parents were simply concerned about what Moses had said. Moses declared, "Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you." But I still wanted her, and after some time my parents agreed. Now my family would have to travel to Timnah with me to seek my wife. The day came and we set out. At one point during the journey, I was alone near the vineyards of Timnah. It was a unique place, as Nazirites were not to have anything to do with grape products in any form. Suddenly, a young lion attacked me. At that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon me, and I tore the lion's jaws apart with my bare hands. As I told you, I was unique. During my time, Asiatic lions were common throughout the Fertile Crescent. Indeed, the lion symbolizes chaos and the untamed world in all its forms. The lion was like a young goat to me. I left that place and did not tell my father or mother about this event. We had to complete our mission. When I arrived in Timnah, I spoke to the woman and was very pleased with her. Everything seemed to be going well. Now I could go home and return here for my own wedding. When the time for the wedding came, I had to leave home once more. During my journey, I passed by the same place where I had killed the lion sometime. I go to look at the lion's carcass, and I discovered that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. I scooped out some honey with my hands and ate it along the way, a reward for a victor. I also gave some to my father and mother, and they ate. But I still did not tell them that I had taken the honey from the carcass of a lion. I did not tell them because it violated my Nazirite vow, which stated that a Nazirite should never touch a dead body. While my father was making the final arrangements for the wedding, I organized a feast in Timnah, as was the custom for young men of the elite. It would be 7 days of pure celebration. Literally, it was a drinking feast, a 7-day festivity in the bride's father's house, culminating in the consummation of the marriage. The seriousness of the matter for me is accentuated by the fact that my Nazirite status specifically prohibited me from consuming grape products. People were officially married when their families reached an agreement. The dowry and bride price were exchanged, and the marriage was officially celebrated. Then, the marriage was consummated, and the two became husband and wife. When the bride's parents saw me, they selected 30 young men from the town as my companions. I was the man of the moment with my own audience. I said to them, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you can solve my riddle during these 7 days of celebration, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of festive clothes. But if you cannot solve it, then you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of festive clothes." They agreed. "Tell us your riddle," they said. So I said, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." 3 days later, they were still trying to figure out the answer. On the 4th day, they said to my wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us to this party to impoverish us?" So my wife came to me weeping and said, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." I said, "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother, so why should I explain it to you?" She cried for the rest of the celebration. Finally, on the 7th day, I told her the answer because she was tormenting me with her tears. Then she explained the riddle to the young men. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town came to me with the answer, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" My Philistine wife's willingness to side with her people against me was a great pain for me. In anger, I replied, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." My wife had achieved what she wanted through manipulation, but she lost my respect. I paid the debt, but I did so at the expense of the Philistines. I executed 30 of those enemies. I went to the town of Ashkelon, killed 30 men, took their belongings, and gave their clothes to the men who had solved my riddle. But I was still furious about what had happened, and I went back home to live with my father and mother. Later, during the wheat harvest, when I was calm, I took a young goat as a gift for my wife. I said, "I will go to my wife's room to sleep with her." But her father would not let me go in. My wife had been given to my companion, who had been my best man. "I thought you hated her," her father exclaimed, "so I gave her to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she is. Marry her instead." I was furious, enraged. Then I said, "This time I cannot be blamed for what I will do to the Philistines." My anger truly unleashed against her people. I took my time and went out to capture 300 foxes. I proved to be the master of beasts, first by effortlessly subduing a lion and then capturing and manipulating 300 foxes. I tied their tails in pairs and fastened a torch to each pair of tails. Then I lit the torches and let the foxes run through the Philistines' grain fields. I burned all their grain, including the shocks and the standing grain. I also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines discovered who had done this, they asked, "Who did this?" "Samson," was the answer. They explained that it was because of my father-in-law's actions that I had destroyed their fields. Then the Philistines went and captured my wife and her father and executed them. When I found out what had happened, I made a vow. "For this, I will not rest until I have taken revenge on you." I was in a complete spiral of rage. First, I was deceived. Then my wife married another. Now she had been executed. This is the bitter story of retaliation, trying to avenge the wrongs done. I attacked the Philistines with great fury and slaughtered many of them. Then I went to live in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines, in retaliation, camped in Judah and spread out near the town of Lehi. When the men of Judah saw them, they asked the Philistines, "Why are you attacking us?" The Philistines said, "We have come to capture Samson. We have come to take revenge on him for what he did to us." Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to capture me in the cave. When they arrived, they said, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" But I replied, "I merely did to them what they did to me." Then the men of Judah said, "We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." I agreed, but made them promise not to kill me. "Although I am strong, I am not invincible." They replied, "We will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. We will not kill you." The fact that the soldiers from the tribe of Judah would hand me over to the Philistines shows how much my people were under the oppression of the Philistines. They would rather appease their oppressors than support me, Samson. I submitted to them. Then they tied me with 2 new ropes and led me up from the rock. As they approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward me shouting triumphantly. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon me. The ropes on my arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from my hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, I grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. It was a one-man army. Then I said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." When I finished my boasting, I threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Jawbone Hill. After this great feat, I became a judge. You see, I belong to a group of people in history called judges, but that does not accurately reflect the meaning of my work. In Hebrew, the word means problem solvers. So you could say I belong to a select group of people whose mission was to save God's people from themselves and others. A judge is described in terms of their achievements. Now I am about to embark on one of the most dangerous missions ever attempted. I judged Israel for 20 years. During this period, the Philistines still dominated the land. After that, I traveled to Gaza, where I saw a prostitute and subsequently had relations with her. The Gazites heard someone say, "Samson is here." So they surrounded the place and waited all night at the city gate to ambush me. They remained silent all night, saying, "In the morning, when it is light, we will kill him." But I rested there until midnight, at which time I got up, took hold of the doors of the city gate and the 2 posts, pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on my shoulders before carrying them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Those gates I carried were not ordinary gates. War chariots needed to pass through the gates of important fortifications, and those gates had to be wide enough. The gates themselves were composed of a pair of double wooden doors. To prevent an adversary from easily entering, the doors had to be made of heavy planks. They were secured on the side by a heavy horizontal beam that slid through slots in the frames. The gates were reinforced by wooden posts whose exteriors rotated in stone sockets. The gates of Gaza, which I wrenched from their sockets and placed on my shoulders, weighed at least 400 or 500 kilograms. After all this, you might think I had learned all my lessons, but I succumbed to temptation again, and my choices, cloaked in pride, would lead me down a treacherous path. It was during one of my journeys that I met Delilah, a woman whose beauty could entangle even the firmest souls. Her cunning seduced me, and I, blinded by my desires, surrendered. I fell in love again, and fell for a woman completely wrong for me. I wanted to be used by God, but I also yielded to the seduction of sin. I zealously maintained the outward characteristics of my Nazirite vow, while simultaneously sinning openly. With a prostitute, I did what almost all of us do when we are deceived by sin. I compartmentalized my life and imagined that there were some categories that mattered to God and others that did not. Once again, I was in Philistine territories, and the rulers were thirsty for blood. The Philistine rulers saw an opportunity to capture me and extinguish the flame of rebellion that burned within my heart. So they went to Delilah and offered her 100 pieces of silver. Delilah was also deeply in love, but she was in love with money. 100 shekels amounted to over 63 kilograms of silver. She accepted their offer. Then she said to me, "Please tell me what makes you so strong and what it would take to bind you securely." I replied, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I will become as weak as any other man." So she tied me with them. With men hidden in the room, she called out to me, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But I snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes too close to a flame. So the secret of my strength was not discovered. Then she said, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." Delilah knew I was strong, but she also knew I could be bound by something, and that was truly the case. I replied, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I will become as weak as any other man." So she took new ropes and tied me with them. The men were hidden in the room as before. And again she called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But once again I snapped the ropes off my arms as if they were threads. Then Delilah said, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." I replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I will become as weak as any other man." So while I was sleeping, she wove the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric and tightened it with the pin. Again she called out to me, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But I awoke, tore the pin and the loom from the fabric, and freed my hair. She exclaimed, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." She tormented me with her nagging day after day until I was sick to death of it. Finally, I shared my secret with her. "No razor has ever been used on my head," I said, "because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." She realized that I had finally told her the truth, so she sent word to the Philistine rulers, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting me to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of my hair, and so began to subdue me, and my strength left me. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." I awoke from my sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But I did not know that the Lord had left me. I didn't realize things had changed. I had lived in compromise for so long that I thought it would never make a difference. At that moment, my strength disappeared, leaving me at the mercy of those who sought my ruin. Chained with shackles, a once mighty man reduced to a mere mortal, I could only watch as my captors celebrated their triumph. The Philistines seized me and gouged out my eyes. Never again would I see the light of day for the rest of my life. This was indeed a cruel punishment by the Philistines. It is ironic that I was first blinded in my captivity. I was drawn into unhealthy relationships by my eyes. My inability to control that attraction to women led me here. I insisted on the freedom to do as I pleased. That left me with no freedom at all. Sin has its wages, and this was my payday. My sin left me blind, in captivity, and enslaved. Before, my blindness, captivity, and slavery were only internal, but eventually they became evident externally. They took me to Gaza, where I was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. Now I am here imprisoned, blind and humiliated, but I found solace in the remnants of my faith. In the depths of my darkest hour, I cried out to the Lord God, seeking one last burst of strength to avenge myself on my enemies. God gave me hope in the midst of a dungeon. I placed my hand on my head and felt it starting to grow rough. Then I placed my hand on my beard and found it rough. Yes, it was coming back. Everything would be all right soon. I would not regain my eyes. They would not grow back. My hair began to grow again. My sin made me a miserable loser, but I would regain my strength again because my hair was growing. I would be able to strike a blow for my people and my God still. The Philistine rulers were holding a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. They said, "Our God has given us victory over our enemy Samson." Dagon, also known as Dagon, was one of the oldest deities of Mesopotamia and was depicted as a half-man, half-fish creature. The god Dagon was considered the father of all other gods. So he was widely worshipped in what we call the cradle of civilization, where agriculture is believed to have first begun. Also, the area some call the Fertile Crescent. The statue of Dagon resembled a giant man. Some representations show him as a merman, which is a human with fish-like characteristics below the waist. Some scholars have called him a fish god, which makes sense given his association with the Philistines and their location along the coast. The Philistines continued worshipping Dagon during my time. Dagon's son, Baal, was worshipped in various ways throughout the land. Dagon was worshipped in temples that could be found throughout Mesopotamia. According to the Bible, the towns of Beth Dagon, Gaza, and Ashdod were home to some of the most important temples. He was worshipped through offerings and participation in festivals. When the people saw me, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands. The one who killed so many of us is now under our power." The followers of Dagon conveyed a direct message to everyone in the land. They responded with, "Our God is stronger than the God of Israel because we conquered Samson." My disobedience led others to deny God. Half-drunk, the people demanded, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So I was brought out of the prison to entertain them. They made me stand between the pillars supporting the roof. The Philistines continued mocking me. In that grand display, they used a boy to watch over me. I asked the young servant who held my hand, "Place my hands against the pillars that hold up the temple. I want to lean against them." Now the temple was completely filled with people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and there were men and women on the roof watching me. In my heart, I prayed silently to God, seeking the strength I once had. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." With my faith renewed, I braced myself against the pillars, with my right hand on one and my left hand on the other. I pushed with all my might, and the temple came crashing down on the rulers and all the people in it. In that final act, I killed more Philistines than I had during my entire life. The story of my life is one of complex dualities, strength and weakness, obedience and rebellion, triumph and tragedy. Even in my failures, God used my life as an instrument of His will. My story serves as a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, redemption is possible. My legacy, intertwined with both the victories and the failures, is a testament to the enduring mercy and grace of God. Through my life, God demonstrated that His purposes are accomplished not by human strength alone, but through His divine will. As I reflect on my journey, I recognize the lessons learned through my experiences. My life, marked by extraordinary feats and profound mistakes, is a testament to the complexities of human nature. I stand as a symbol of both the potential for greatness and the depths of human folly. My story endures, not just as a tale of might, but as a reminder of the enduring power of faith and the possibility of redemption. As I conclude my story, I leave behind a legacy of caution and hope, urging those who follow to seek the wisdom of God, to embrace His guidance, and to trust in His unfailing love.